Get ready for a great show.
Black space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
Hello, I'm George Middleton, your host this evening on this podcast episode of Black Space Live. The topic and title of our show today is we're going to examine the question, how do we build back the Black nuclear family? That's a huge one. Before we get started, I would like to take time to briefly encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. In other words, don't be selfish with this content. Share the love. We have a star-studded cast and crew of panelists this evening. My God, I don't know if I have enough brain power to handle what you all are going to experience this evening. We have no weak personalities. Whew. Oh, I need to go do some warm-ups real quick. Loosen up. Whew. This gonna be a good one. So what I want to do, and we also have one other guest who's flying in from his 747, probably running through the airport right now, trying to get to the podcast studio. Hopefully we've got some film on his transition because it's exciting to watch. Reminds me of the old Gale Sayers commercial when he was running through the airlines there. I don't know. I'm probably the only one old enough to remember that because you guys, I can still smell Similac on your breath. So anyway, let's let the panelists introduce themselves because they really need no introduction. But we're going to start with Zuri. Zuri, please tell the listeners, viewers, and watchers what you think they should know about you for this evening.
Hey everybody, Missouri. People Nation. I've been doing a pretty good job, so I don't ever have an introduction.
Welcome, Zuri. And China.
Hey, George.
Hi guys, China here. I'm excited to be discussing this topic with you guys. So glad to be here tonight.
We're equally excited to have you, China. And Daniel.
Yes, sir. The Daniel Williams, Mr. One of One, none before, none to come. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to this discussion. George, you can see I've been working on my introduction.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're always well and polished, but I always like to bring it back. I wish this was not a PG rated channel because, I have my own favorite pet introduction for you. Daniel, I ain't scared of you, expletive, Williams.
At all.
At all. No fear. Unapologetically. So, hey, let me do a little quick kind of unrehearsed monologue just to set this up, because this is really first of all, I'm a therapist. And if you know anything about therapists love good questions. And the title of this podcast is a really excellent question. That you can approach this question from so many different ways. How do we build back the Black nuclear family? So let me just set the context. Here is what our community is facing. In education, we're facing the false fear of critical race theory, which has contributed to a movement of curriculum whitewashing, where somehow critical race theory has gotten conflated with African American history, which is propelled by the resurgence, maybe not a resurgence, maybe it's just coming into our awareness, maybe this has been building all along, of white nationalism. This really reflects on our, as an African American community, it reflects on our qualitative status as a quote unquote community. And to borrow from a phrase from a guru of mine who I've never met, but I'm in total awe of, Dr. Claude Anderson, author of Powernomics. His definition of community is one that can get all of its needs met, of the majority, at least 95% of its needs met, within its own network before it goes outside of its network for any other resources. And when you apply that definition to the African American community, Dr. Anderson says, we really don't have a community. We just have a place to sleep. Then let's add on to that by the year 2053, the average wealth per Black family, get this now, I hope you listeners are really listening, will be $0. Now that falls different based on where you are in African American community. If you are a so-called quote unquote successful Black, you're gonna have a hard time relating to that statistic because you're thinking, hey, I've got mine. My wealth is up. I'm living where I want to live. My reputation, my job precedes me. My insurance is good. My 401k is great. So I can't understand why anybody would be looking at $0 wealth in 2053. And so I just want to set this marker for those who may be thinking like that individual success is not synonymous with collective success. Some may get that. For others, it may take a minute. And then lastly, and most importantly, that most people don't realize, and then I'll open it up to the panelists. Get ready, y'all. And I really want you to hear me because this is serious business, what I'm getting ready to share with you. Racism is officially declared by every medical and psychological health association and organization a public health crisis. And I want to say that one more time. Racism is officially declared by every major medical and psychological association a public health crisis. that means it is as serious as COVID-19. However, most people can emotionally and cerebrally connect with COVID-19 as a public health crisis. But it's really, they're struggling with the concept of racism as a public health crisis. The intervention, the official intervention for a public health crisis is threefold: prevention, mitigation, and repair. So, racism isn't like COVID-19. You can't mask yourself from racism. You can't social distance yourself from racism. And there is no vaccine for racism. There is an intervention, however. And even though we're not on the show to particularly discuss this, the intervention is my platform. This is what I teach and promote: how to address racism from a public health crisis. But I digress. So this is the context that I want to set for this conversation. It's a multifaceted problem. So I don't claim to have the whole perspective, totality of the width, depth, and breadth of this issue. But I'm giving you my perspective, and we have three other very powerful, and four other actually, because he'll be here. Very powerful personalities, experts in their own right, and passionate about our community. So I've set the context. What I like to do is kind of go around the horn, and beginning with China, and I'll let you respond with whatever your thoughts were on the impromptu monologue that I began with, and whatever thoughts that you might have that you feel we need to examine this question from China.
Number one, that's sad, that I have, we now have racism as a public health crisis. Why is that now a public health crisis? Have we not had issues? Have we not learned anything from not even 50 years, not even 40 years? Did we not learn anything with Trayvon? Did we not learn anything with these Black men being gunned down? Have we not learned anything with that? So do you know, can you tell me, when did this become a public health crisis? Do you know?
Yes, it was declared on the advent of COVID-19.
Okay.
COVID-19 has revealed all of the disparities within our community. And the majority of these disparities fall along racial lines. So as a result of COVID, organizations like the American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Pediatrics Association, I have the declaration. I can refer to it. It has a list, a panorama, Center for Disease Control. All of these major organizations are on record on the official declaration of racism as a public health crisis.
Got it.
Yes.
But isn't it crazy that we knew COVID was a public health crisis? And
Exactly.
I'm just now learning right now that
Exactly.
racism is a public. That's really sad. You know what I'm saying?
Isn't that something?
So yeah, it's why now? Why now? That's what I have to say.
Great question. Why now? Okay, that's powerful right there. Zuri.
I was like, my internet was going in and out, so I was trying to pick up where you guys left off.
Zira, share with us your perspective on my impromptu monologue and anything that you think needs to be added in the context of this discussion this evening.
I agree with what you said, and like China said, it's very sad. And I'm also, well, I kind of know the why now answer, but I feel like when it has to do with racism, it's because they are targeting a certain ethnicity of people. So, and that's the main people. Just like with the COVID, they were aiming for targeting a main group of people that they generally really wanted to take the shot. And the same thing now, they're targeting a certain group of people, which is us, or as they say, the brown folks, as they like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm hoping, I'm pretty sure we all know why they are targeting us. So it's crazy. It's a lot of things that can go into that, because I never felt like COVID was really a crisis. I mean, it was a crisis, but it wasn't. It was a fear tactic. It wasn't everything that they made it out to be. I'll put it that way. So I don't really feel like it was a crisis. They made it into a crisis.
That is an interesting perspective, because I would dare say that for many in the African American community, most of the communities, from a statistical percentage, nothing I'm saying is of a opinion here. Mm-hmm. From a statistical percentage, a large majority of our community is living in survival mode as it is.
Right.
And so the advent of COVID, to the average African American person, would say, well, what's new? There's nothing different here for me.
True.
Okay. Daniel, I ain't scared of you. Bleep, bleep, Williams.
Man, so I think it's necessary to understand that when we talk about it from a public health crisis, we live in a land of people who like to throw rocks and hide their hands. Right. So to admit that it's a public health crisis is also to admit that you're culpable in creating that situation. And multiple aspects of that situation. So I'm actually looking here now, and this will probably touch a little bit more on as we get into the discussion. These are the top 3 leading causes of death from ages 1 through 19 for Black males. The first one is unintentional injuries. And that generally affects young people, let's say ages 1 through 7 or 8. Number 2 is homicide. And that's a lot of issues that come along with that. And we were probably going to dive a little bit more into it. Number 3 is suicide. And all of these conditions are related to people throwing rocks and hiding their hands, creating systems, then stepping back and saying, I think the best way to put it is people think that they're not racist because they say, I don't personally hate people of color, Black people.
Right.
But they don't realize that you can still be racist because you continue to perpetuate a racist system. And so I think there's a lot to be discussed when we start talking about the impacts of system. Like I can't remember who said it, but basically he said, if a white man hates me, that's his problem. But if he hates me and has the power to take my life or my livelihood, then that becomes my problem.
Right.
And so it's not the lack of love for us, but it's the fact that that is also connected to a systemic advantage that places us as marginalized people, because the system was designed that way. And I think any discussion has to kind of take into account the effects of that over a period of decades and generations and how that manifests itself today.
Excellent. And I love that. I want to find out who said that, because that's, very relevant. I'm going to open it up with a question. First question. can there be a functional Black community without the Black nuclear family? Why or why not? Let's start with, I'm gonna go backwards this time. Well, no, I'm gonna go backwards. Let's start with, well, no, I'm trying to set up my, the energies here. Let's start with Zuri. Zuri, can there be a functional, keyword functional, Black nuclear family, in your opinion? Why or why not?
I believe there can be a Black nuclear family, but like you said, without, what was the question again?
Can there be a functional one? Can there be a functional one? And I think that's a key question. That question is really the questions I'm asking here really aren't my questions, but I really love them. So this particular one I think is key because the word is functional. You know, as a therapist, I can attest that most of us are living in dysfunctional situations, regardless of our socioeconomic status.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I believe in order to be functional, we do need the nuclear family. I don't think single parenting or just children. No, you need the foundation, the father, the mother, the children, the backbones of the family, the support of the community, the tribe. So you do need the nuclear family in order for it to be functional, you say, and not dysfunction. Too many of us live in dysfunctional families and we think it's normal, and it's really not normal.
Yes. So you believe that we can?
Yeah, if we go back to having nuclear families and we all get on the same page once again, I believe it can happen. It happened once before, Black Wall Street. You know, back in the day when we did have nuclear families, it can happen again. I would say never. Anything's possible when we all stand together.
But really, were we functional during Black Wall Street? And here's why I asked the question. We were fresh off of being freed. And we have then the traumas, you know, again, because we live in, and you said it, I love that you said this, a state of normalized dysfunction. The average African family during that time, just off of the abolishment of slavery, had lived experiences that, even though may not have been diagnosed then officially, of post-traumatic stress disorder.
True.
And actually it's called today post-traumatic slave syndrome.
PTSD.
And I mean, just think about it. You're coming off of people who are fresh from the experiences of the slave master regularly raping the African woman, regularly lynching and killing the African male. So even though in the era of Black Wall Street, you know, one thing you can say about our culture is resiliency is on lock. We got resiliency down.
Yeah.
And so we can take a lemon and make lemonade from anything. But does that mean that we're functional?
I was going to also add in there also, even way before Black Wall Street, when we had tribes and communities and we were functioning before we were ever, what would we say,
Enslaved?
took over, enslaved, or the colonists came over. But before,
Right.
when we had tribes and we were living, then we were functional before we were ever even interrupted by them. We forget that part of our history.
Not that we forget it, we were stripped from it.
Right, we were stripped, and they don't teach it enough for a lot of people to know.
Exactly.
So that's why I say I believe in it, because once upon a time it happened.
It was there.
It was there.
It was there. So remember that you said that, because this question says, can there be a functional Black family? And I don't want to give it away, but I just want that's really important. that criteria, that category. Okay, let's go to China. Can there be a functional nuclear black family? Why or why not?
If we keep going down the road that we're going, we will not. If we keep going down that road. Less than 25% of Black women will get married, right? So if less than 25% of Black women will get married, that means majority of our children will be born to single mothers. Because if you're not married, you're single, right? So I think it was back in like 2000, let's just say 2010 or somewhere around there, 70% of babies that were born, black babies, were born to single mothers. If we don't change, we got to start there. We got to start with getting mothers and fathers under one roof. We have to start there. So if we continue on this road that we're on, the short answer will be no. The short answer for me would be no. We can't have. It's disheartening to know that I could potentially not get married and have my dream. It's disheartening to know that my family, my friends, good Black women will never receive that. We're on the back end of that. So if we keep going down this road that we're on, my answer is no.
I agree.
Okay. That's definitely going to be a worthy line of thought to dig into in this podcast. Daniel.
So two things. I want to answer the question, but I'm going to answer the question. I'm going to answer it the way I think you're looking at it, and then I want to just touch on something that China noted. So the first thing is, yes, it is possible, for a variety of reasons. Am I echoing or no?
No.
No,
I hear just a little bit.
Sure.
I just hear a little bit, but it's okay.
All right. So for me, that it's necessary, right? It's necessary for a host of reasons. 1, stability. 2, protection. 3, economics. And we're going to talk about that as we go through it. But I also know that the key word that you kind of noted when you repeated the question was Black, and I understand your perspective on the term Black. So I will rephrase it as it's necessary to have a functional African family, nuclear family, for a host of other reasons, all noted above. The one thing I did want to note on what China said is, and the statistics are kind of misleading. While unwed and married mean the same thing from a tax perspective, they don't mean the same thing from a household perspective. And that is important to note. 45% of children are born into households of women alone. But there's a segment of households where the woman is unmarried, but the father lives in the household. And that is important to note because they do count as a nuclear family for both, largely from the economic standpoint and the stability standpoint. So it is something worth noting that while there is a significant portion of children born to unwed mothers, just because the mother is unwed, that doesn't necessarily automatically equate to being a traditional single mother, because a single mother is generally understood as a mother who has no father figure involved in the process of raising the child. And I think it's necessary to kind of differentiate between the two, because as we start discussing the impact of fathers missing in the household, we want to make sure that we're talking. I would like to make sure I'm talking about that from an accurate perspective.
That's a very important nuance there. Okay, so that go ahead, Jerry.
I was saying I didn't think about that. The unwed
Mhm.
mothers, where the fathers are still living in the house that aren't married, and that happens a lot too. So I didn't even think about that perspective.
Yeah.
There are a lot of households, and somebody recently, and I have to go back and check this. A household where children are raised just by the mother. Sorry, children that are raised in two family households do significantly better than children, long-term perspective, that are only raised in households just by the mother. But those same studies showed that children that are only raised by the father actually account for about the same level of attainment and accomplishment as children raised in two-parent households.
That's true.
So that is a very, very interesting dynamic that it's not just single parenthood, but specifically, especially young men, but single motherhood that tends to be the issue. And this is not to put it on the mothers. This is actually as we talk more about this, it's really a call to action for us as men to be more involved in the process of building strong families, because you can't have a strong family if half of the equation is not involved in the actual day-to-day raising of these young men and children.
Which segues into my next question. Because of that, I would, there's this concept called feminism. And as I'm hearing Daniel talk, I'm thinking, the African-American woman was probably a feminist long before feminism was popular, became popular. Not from a conscious standpoint, but from a having to live and survive standpoint. I want to put that out there. We don't have to delve directly into that, but I want to set that out there, because here's the question: how much of an impact has feminism had on the Black nuclear family, or lack thereof, positive or negative? Anybody that feels comfortable addressing feminism, jump right in.
Ooh, I've had this conversation twice this week, so I'm gonna go ahead and hop right in here.
Okay.
First and foremost, all right, we'll start with the big, and then we'll break down the nuances.
Okay.
I think it has absolutely been one of the most disastrous things, other than the systemic issues, and probably one of the most insidious things ever done to our families. And here's the reason I say that.
Okay.
Traditionally, feminism has made the case that if a woman does the same job as a man, a woman should be paid the same as a man. One. Two, a woman should have the same rights from a societal standpoint as a man does. For instance, it wasn't until 1976 that a woman could open a bank account without a man being present, either a husband or a father, right? So that's a relatively reasonable right to fight and ask for. In 2023, however, a lot of what passes for what is considered and falls under the feminism umbrella is largely misogyny, which is the other side of the coin of misogyny, which is a hatred of men masquerading as woman empowerment. The reason that I say that it's insidious is because women of the broader population were fighting for rights that their men had that they kept from them. The African woman and the African man largely got their rights at the same time. There's very few cases where a man of color, a Black man, had a privilege that his woman did not have. And so this thing where, but in order to have the numbers, they had to bring our women in under their tent. And I think that it has become a thing where them fighting with their men, and they brought our women in, but the same fight that they have with their men is not the fight that our women have with us.
I agree.
And I think that that has been this thing where we believe that we're at odds because they're at odds. No, our women actually are out educated more than we are, and in a lot of cases, if you look at the averages after accounting, if you factor back in the men that are part of the incarcerated system, um, in a lot of cases, our women actually out earn and out attain us. Black women have higher levels of home ownership, higher levels of advanced degrees, and they also have attained higher level of business startups. So when we're looking at what they're able to accomplish, their attainment is not out. What we accomplish was never at their expense, as in dominant society. But because there's been this, and by the way, it's interesting to note that because when it comes down to it, those same women will vote against the very interests that they say they're fighting for. Hence why Hillary Clinton was never president. And ultimately, they will vote in line with their men. So after they've caused a wedge between us and our woman, then they will actually cause that wedge between. They will go back and align back with their men. So when I say insidious, it's because they continue to replicate and they continue to sustain the very system that we're trying to fight to break down.
Wow. Perspectives. That's a perspective of feminism. In all my discussions that I was not even conscious of. The fact that in our community, the African man and woman achieved their rights at the same time. There was no layering where the male got some and then the female got some. I never even looked at it from that perspective. The idea that the white woman needed numbers, so they conscripted the African woman to generate those numbers.
It's true.
I just got a a text here. There was a previous statistic. I think Daniel wrote it off. The producer wanted to clarify, to say it's 64% of Black households that are single mothers. This includes not having any spouse at all, not simply just unmarried, but not having any spouse at all. 64% of Black households have single mothers, not being any spouse in the home at all.
True, because I was going to say one of the statistics that I just read earlier this week also stated that there is many Black men that they think are incarcerated. They're really not. There's not that many of us incarcerated like we think they are. That we think they are incarcerated, and there's not. There's plenty of Black men. There's actually more Black men not incarcerated and that are earning degrees as well. And, I have a college degree myself in different things, but I have two. But at the same time, education and intelligence is two totally different things.
So how do you think what is this statistic saying about our situation then?
What is this saying about a situation about
Yeah,
becoming a nuclear
you
family?
you're saying that the numbers of that's reported of Black men being incarcerated are inflated, that in actuality they're not as high. What is that? How is that a reflection? How is that impacting the state of our community? What does that say about our community?
To me, I think it says that, well, number one, that the numbers are lying. And number two, that the black man is doing way more than they want, or accomplishing way more than what they want the world to know. Because the black man has always been put down and put like the very less liked out of anybody. So they're not ever going to put out that, like, say, black men are the most active in their children's lives. And just like what Daniel said, a one parent father household is just like being in a dual, having a mother and father, even financially, because a single mother can't even put out the same financially as a single father can, taking care of the children. And then the children are like most likely less to end up in jail, not live in poverty, and all those different things. Even when it's just one father raising, it could be several children, 2 children, versus the black woman or the single mom raising the child by themselves.
So tie that back into Daniel's earlier assessment that the African American woman is out earning, out educating, out home owning the average man. What is that saying? What is that? If black men are doing better than what's reported, what speaks to the statistic of, on average, the African male being outperformed by his African American
And
female?
also, understand that, but also, did they let you know that the black woman is the most evicted right now in her houses and things of that nature? And then you have to think, once upon a time, because I think when I was going to college, maybe, I think, when did I start college? Like maybe around the era of 2005, 6, 7, 8, they were giving those loans majority to black women and going to school. And then the thing we have to look at is, are they finishing? Just because, and most of the time that's just an enrollment, it's not who's graduating. And then even buying houses, they can be giving houses to black women, just like how they downgrade or don't like to give black people mortgages versus the white person, the Chinese person. So you have to take all that into account. And to me, a lot of those numbers just like to make it seem like the black woman's more dominant than the black man, but that's not what it is. Or like they're above the black man and the black man is beneath us. And also, there's no hardworking single black male that's getting evicted from his home. And a lot of women, you also have to think of also that are buying houses. A lot of people can get on these Section 8 programs that allow you to become a homeowner. They have something like that going on now in the area where I live at. They don't offer those kinds of programs to the black man.
Why?
You said, why don't they?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question.
The state has been trying to replace the black man in the lives of. So, all right, one of the things, and it was something interesting that I didn't realize until I actually got a chance to look at what happened. If you look at urban welfare and how that is administered in a lot of the cases, to qualify for these programs, for instance, housing assistance, but you cannot qualify for, most women cannot qualify for housing assistance if there's an able-bodied man in the house, right? So in order to get the assistance, the man cannot be part of the household. If you were to compare that to, let's say, a farming subsidy program, that is not a requirement of a farm subsidy program, which is not recognized as a welfare program. But if you're going to pay people not to do something, it kind of sounds like a welfare program, right? And then when you look at it, who largely benefits from farm subsidy programs,
right,
as opposed to who is largely recognized as the face of welfare when we talk about urban programs. So the system said, and it was somebody, I cannot remember who pointed this out, right? But they basically pointed out how after the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement, there were still the strong nuclear family up until the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement was largely supported by affluent, middle class African American families. largely driven by jobs, not even white collar jobs. A lot of them were blue collar jobs. So what they did is they changed the tax code to incentivize moving manufacturing jobs overseas, deindustrialize the urban cities, right? So now you take the jobs that the middle class was built around in places such as Michigan. In the 80s, Detroit, Michigan was the richest and wealthiest city in the world. And nowadays, you can literally buy an entire block for money most of us probably have in our checking account, right? But you move the manufacturing jobs overseas, and if you can't get it, these are jobs 2, 3 generations had worked at that plant for generations. You move those jobs overseas, so you create the despair, and then right behind that despair, you came in and you flooded the community, the neighborhood, with heroin at the time, and then you criminalized that, and then you punished it even more so, and then you created more despair, and then you created crack, and then you put that intentionally into our neighborhoods, and then you criminalized that at higher levels, and then you incarcerated at higher. So it was this.
I think they put the guns in the neighborhoods too.
You can't forget about the guns in the neighborhood, right? So there was, and all of that was not targeted at targeting the black woman, but rather to remove the element. And we looked at the example of the Black Panthers, for instance, which were black men who stood up to protect their neighborhood, and how that was very intentional campaigns to not just smear their name, but also to actually eliminate them over a course of time through different encounters with law enforcement. The move bombing, which was the second time in American history that American citizens were bombed by their own government. The first time, incidentally, being, as Zuri had mentioned, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So all of these incidents were aimed at removing the influence of the strong
Black man.
in their community.
That's what I was going to agree with Daniel on that. Like, say they've been trying to remove the black man from the family forever, and then Section 8, like, says government assistance is one big way. You remove the masculine black male from the family, you remove protection from the woman. You remove protection from the neighborhood. It's easier to manipulate women than it is to manipulate men.
And I do want to say, regarding the fact that more women do get evicted, and this is one of the functions of the way the system generally works. A lot of that is due to the fact that in most cases, the mother has custody of the children and the father doesn't. So the father doesn't necessarily have to have his own space to live. Fathers can go out and get roommates and see their kids on the weekend or every other week. But in a lot of cases, the mother is not only responsible for keeping a roof over her head, but she's also responsible for also maintaining the household of multiple people with one income. It goes back to, at the root of it all, it requires two healthy, functional individuals to have a strong nuclear family, because the roles have to be played by each party, and it has to be a complementary partnership rather than one person carrying a lion's share of the load, which is what it has been for probably 3 decades, if not longer.
China, what say you?
Oh, wow. Oh, where should I begin? I agree with everything you guys are saying wholeheartedly. Even I want to go back a little bit. I want to bring this up though, but let's stay here. So you now have more women who are professionals and who are choosing not to have children. Why? Because we're not getting married, right? So to go back to what Zuri and Daniel mentioned, a lot of times I've actually met a few men who actually had custody of their children. Sometimes they are not doing it alone. They have their mothers, they have their aunts, they have someone helping in and stepping in, because we think, oh, this man can't do this by himself. So even though they're at home with them, custodially, they're not necessarily doing it on their own. Versus a woman who has children, she may not get the help that she needs. She may not get a helping hand because they say, oh, she can do it. Oh, she got it. She's a strong, independent woman. You know, you have to actually put that into play as well, you know. As far as, and you know, this is definitely not popular. We all have our stories. We all have had struggles. We have. But at some point, it has to start with me, right? I can't fault anyone for anything that I didn't achieve that I set myself up to do, right? I used to teach school. I taught in a poverty-stricken area. I did. I was so happy to see some of my students graduate, go off to college, go into, you know, the military. They're nurses. One's an engineer. They're having families. They're getting married, and they come from a poverty-stricken area. What did they do? There was no excuses, none whatsoever. They had as many as they could name, but they chose not to play victim to it and fall victim to it. So I understand Jim Crow. I understand everything. I really do. But at some point, we have to want best for ourselves. So I'll just end it right there.
So there, powerful statement there, and that I hear often, not often, but I hear every so often. We have to want better for ourselves. Let's examine that. To the panelists, is it that we don't want better for ourselves? And if so, why?
I don't think a lot of us want better for ourselves because it just shows in our everyday choices, the things we're doing, how we're raising our children, the things we like to participate in, the things we like to entertain. No, those that, like I said, those that want better for themselves make better choices. They sacrifice, they make the changes that's needed so they don't have to end up in those kinds of situations. And like China said, when she taught at the poverty-stricken school, that those children, even though all odds are against them, they chose to do better and want better. And we as adults, some of us, we get so complacent in what we're doing, we allow our children to keep going through the same cycles and being comfortable, especially women. And those are things that we have to stop doing. Like China says, we have to start being accountable for what we do and stop trying to sugarcoat everything and make it seem like it's all right when it's really doing more harm than helping us.
So the example of the children at the school that wanted to do better, what contributed to their motivation to wanting to do better?
I think their environment, just looking around, knowing that, you know, sometimes when you grow up, you're like, hey, I want better than this. I want better than what my parents have, or this isn't me. This isn't going to be me. Or just even being around the right adults or having good mentors that let you know and you see better. Sometimes your vision is bigger than the zip code or wherever you're from.
I wanted to just touch in on that before we went too far away from it. Some of the insight is largely based on who you see around you, right? So for statistical purposes, Black men in education, in school, K through 12, are only 2% of the teachers. We're 14% of the population. Black men make up 2% of the teachers. And most of them are tied to some sort of a coaching position in a lot of those cases. Right. So in a lot of cases, and I can't remember where I was, where somebody actually asked the question, how many Black teachers did you have in K through 12? And how old were you before you had your first Black male teacher? So part of it is there are a lot of our women in education, which makes it easier for our girls to pattern themselves after positive role models. And I say that because the next statement is they have weaponized what we consider to be our culture against us. Our music is largely negative and has been so for a long time. Even what we consider the classics was largely negative, but it has gotten even increasingly so and increasingly more violent. And we're actually starting to see where a lot of these young men aren't even living out of their 20s who participate in that industry. And then what we consider to be entertainment, with the exception of 3 or 4 movies that they toss at us a year, is largely also negative and counterproductive. So here on one side, you have culture that's largely negative and counterproductive. You have a dearth of positive role models, and then you have less savory role models kind of stepping in to kind of fill in that gap. Nature abhors a vacuum. If there's a vacuum, nature will find a way to fill it. And if it's not something positive, it's probably going to be filled with something that's going to be counterproductive.
Yeah, you know, it's funny when you talked about the black male teachers, Daniel, it's been proven where they've actually did studies about the black man being teacher. Children listen, they said if they had more black male teachers in the school teaching, the children would be more disciplined. They would listen. And a lot of the times the women can't handle the children, especially the younger black males.
I'm education adjacent. I work for an education-based nonprofit, and right now I'm actually running a program, a out of school program. We got some funding for in conjunction with one of the local municipalities, and it's specifically aimed at our young men. It's a mentorship program that teaches economic and entrepreneurial basics, and it is currently run by 3 of us who look like them in the room. And I can tell you right now, the energy in that room is very different than the energy in a classroom. But there's a level of relevancy and relatability that they don't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis. And so there's an impact. There's a significant, this conversation can really be boiled down to something that I think it was Frederick Douglass said, which is, it is easier to build strong men than it is to repair broken boys, or easier to build strong boys than it is to repair broken men. It really starts with we who have made it, as George said a little bit earlier, we got ours. We got to go back. We got to be seen. They got to see us. And we can't just go back to drive around the neighborhood like, who, look at what I do. I'm an inspiration and then leave. Like, we have to go back and really show them we have to impact them on a personal level. And far too many of us.
It gets back to community. The definition of community is that a community? Is that going back? I mean, I love that example of yours. Going back because you made it and flossing in your neighborhood as a sign of inspiration. Is that community building?
Not at all. Not even close. You know, community building is spending time listening to them and then giving them actual advice and support to help them get to that next level. And much like what was noted about these young women, that's what they get. Young girls do get a lot of support, more so than we understand that they're getting, because they're seeing themselves in a lot of the women that are in the classroom. And I can tell you one thing about a black woman teacher: she's not going to let you fail under her watch if she has something to say about it. She's going to make sure that, because she sees herself in every single one of those young girls. And so her personal goal is to do her best to give her that. Our young men don't necessarily have that same.
And on that,
welcome, Penny.
There's a plethora of research, and I'll just read from one particular study titled 4 Troubling Truths About Black Boys in the U.S. Educational System. Number 1, Black boys are more likely to be placed in special education. Number 2, Black boys are more likely to attend schools without the adequate resources to educate them. Number 3, Black boys are not reading at an adequate level. And number 4, and most importantly, punishment for Black boys is harsher than for any other demographic. So again, you know, if we're going to be real, if we're going to tell the truth, that's why I asked this question, why? Because to get to the solution, you have to get down to the why. It's easy to say, well, The reason they're not doing it is because of what they're doing. Okay, we understand. Yeah, you're doing that. It's not smart to take a hammer and hit yourself in the head. I want to know why you want to take the hammer to your head. Why? And that's important. It's why is the question that's not about blaming, finger pointing, or judgment. It's about understanding. Because only through understanding, blame and judgment never provide solutions. Only understanding does. Understanding and accountability. Accountability and responsibility is not synonymous to finger pointing and blaming. And what happens a lot is people will finger point and blame thinking that that's being accountable. No, that's not. Because even if I didn't do it, if you're in my community, it's my responsibility. It's not enough for me to just sit back and say, well, I'm handling my business. It's still my responsibility. If my brother is not in a good position, it's not right. Even if it's not my fault, it's still, if I have any sense of empathy, caring as a human being, my responsibility to try to address that.
George, I just was reading something on the community level when you say a lot of people feel like it is their responsibility, but sometimes we have to think of just certain communities where it comes. Does the community even want to save itself? There's been plenty of times where a lot of us have went back to the community and really bad things have happened to us just for trying to help them out. Like, who do they think they are? Who do they think they are? They can come back and help us. And sometimes we have to realize it. Is it worth the pain? If the community really doesn't want to save itself or want the help that the people are trying to come in, and what kind of help that the people are trying to bring into the community? Is it worth losing your life over?
So on that question, we're going to let the most recent addition to the panel come in and field that very thought-provoking question. Welcome, Penny.
Good evening, y'all. My apologies for my tardiness. Today's been a very busy day. I hear that often, that people say, we can't go back into the community because it's a fight. It's so rough and it's just dangerous. But we have no problem pouring resources. And I know we're talking about our boys. That's a very tender spot. That's a very tender conversation to me, because I raise that question and that topic all the time. We put no resources into our boys. We put a ton of resources into our girls. There's a ton of effort put into them. If you are a boy who has academically talented, or you could play a sport, yeah, there's focus on you because there's a lane to put you in. But if you're an average Black boy, you are invisible to the entire education system and most of the community. And so this idea that you don't have to go back to the community per se, but you can certainly, stand on your soapbox. We vote. Many of us are politically connected, or we know connects. We have networks. You can demand that they put those same resources into our boys. You can make those demands, but we don't do that. We don't. There's so much focus on our girls, and it gets worse as they get older. You know what I'm saying? There are so many. You got Babe America and the $500 million that they're investing in Black women. And I work for a airline that shall not be named, that is deliberately tried to hire women and people of color, but their focus is Black women because they check off both boxes. Nothing wrong with that, but again, that for every one of them that you step forward, there's about 5 or 6 boys that become men that you left behind. And communities, contrary to popular belief, are only as strong as the men in those communities. We're constantly talking about the disarray and the need for strong men to step up. But those boys that y'all ignore become those men that don't have the tools, and they're left to natural selection. And that frustrates me. Again, make the argument that men are left to themselves. Fine, we're here, we can figure it out. But our boys are failing. They're failing, and it's not even alarming to anybody.
Yes.
And that troubles me on so many levels. And I just, and I apologize for, this rant, but
no, this is perfect. Perfect timing.
This is frustrating to me. I'm heading back to up north to Morgan to have conversations, because that city is struggling with the youth crime problem. And I said it, listen, this is 40 years of divestment. You scoffed at the shop classes. You scoffed at the midnight basketball league. You scoffed at all these things that are going to keep boys on the path, and you defunded them because they're just not necessary. And now you're dealing with the cost of that. And Mark's not the only city. There's many cities dealing with this same problem.
Yep.
Boys have to be put on the path. If you don't put them on the path, they'll find their own path. And many times it's not the path that we like.
I was going to say I'm not a man, but I just feel, I understand, I get where you guys are coming from, because I believe the same thing, because like they say, black women are empowered, but who's going to empower the black men? And I also feel like with the young boys, like what Penny said, if they're not playing, if they're not great at something, they're pulled off the track. I feel like nowadays, if young boys could see more than what they see on TV, like rap, everybody doesn't want to be a thug, everybody doesn't want to be a rapper. If they see the plethora of different kind of men who made it because they can relate to all different kinds, I think that would help as well. Like just seeing all the different kinds of men instead of just one group, because there's all different kinds. Like I say, boys are into everything. So if they can see that generalization of grown men coming to help them, that there's not just, oh, if you don't play sports, then you're not this, but the one, like you said, that has other interests, that's into music, that's into reading books, that's into engineering, I think a lot of that would help as well in the community. Because nowadays, a lot of times with black men, they just try to focus on, like you say, the rapper, the athletic person, and that's not, majority of people don't make it. It's only like a small percentage of people that become athletes and that become artists. What about the rest of everybody else? Those are the other kind of men that these young boys need to start seeing and interacting with as well. That's just in my opinion.
I love that you said that. And I do want to touch on something, that nothing is ever done intentional when it's systematic. There was an interesting statistic that I found, and the website is blackdemographics.com. If you've never seen the website,
love that.
Whenever
website.
we have
love
these discussions, look, it's important to pull it as best the information we can. Were y'all aware that black women and black women actually got married at higher rates until 1970 than their white counterparts? Did anyone know that? Because I didn't know that. That was news to me.
I knew that.
That was news to me.
Yeah.
Now, from 1970 to now, we've had the war on poverty, the war on drugs, mass incarceration, the proliferation of crack cocaine into our neighborhoods, another war on drugs, right? So we've had all of these things, all tied in incidentally to the rise of for-profit prisons. So the for-profit prison industrial complex has also come around the same time that Penny mentioned the divestment into our communities. And so it is important to note that that is not by accident. That is done intentionally, because if you remove it from, because these companies operate basically like hotels. Their job is to maximize occupancy.
Profit.
And the only way you maximize occupancy is try to criminalize as many things as possible, remove the things that keep people from going into the wrong direction and making the wrong decisions, and then you just let nature take its course. So it is important to understand that these efforts were done intentionally, with the understanding that, and I can't remember which one of the young women said it, our young men are actually criminalized at higher rates for the very same incidents, more so than any other group.
Yes.
And it starts there. It creates a distaste for the system of education, and that just continues to spiral downhill. So you're getting young men that are turned off from education, turned off from the attainment of knowledge. And by the way, even though I work education adjacent, I'm aware that the system is in dire need of a restructure, especially for our young men. But there's also the attainment of knowledge has to be paramount. They have to see us looking to try to accomplish that.
Well, it is getting restructured. DeSantis is restructuring it as we speak.
Oh my God!
DeSantis.
I think you accidentally misconstrued reconstruction and deconstruction.
Okay, drop that mic, brother. But you covered several different areas, and I want to back up and go to a previous one because it ties into what China said earlier in the program about more African American women doing it on their own, getting married, more educated, more working, more successful. Here's the question. I think it's going to answer itself based on everything you just said, but I got to ask it. And then I want to ask a question after this. Is the Black community better off now with the low marriage rate of only less than 30%, or were we better off before 1970 with a marriage rate of over 80%? Now there's two ways to go with that. If we were better off in 1970 with a higher marriage rate, what to the Black woman, to the African woman, what will it take to achieve that? If we're better off now with the low marriage rate, then case closed. But if we truly are better off with a higher marriage rate to build back the Black nuclear family, I want to hear from the women here on this panel. What will it take for the African women here in your population to regain that trend of high marriage rates?
I think one primarily kind of stop chasing careers over family. A lot of us like to chase careers over family, and then, like, if you notice or even watch the news or different things, that by the time a lot of us have chased a career or put the career above the man and the family, there's no children. We haven't had any children. And then when the career is almost finishing over, you're already at that late age where you want to have children. And it's like, it's kind of it's not to say it's too late, but nobody wants to hear all that after you done put the career above having a family, when family comes first. I think that's a large part of the problem.
Zuri, you ain't gotta talk about me like that now, Zuri. You ain't gotta talk about me like that.
You know, like they say, as young Black girls, we have been taught to be, like China said, strong, independent, not need a man, not need a family. And then by the time that we look at it, it's like, oh, we've aged, or we are in our 40s. Now we want a family. Now we want children. And it's late. And we have been taught the wrong things.
So I actually spoke with someone about this before the call. There was a video that was going out with a young Black man, or I think he was in his 30s. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. But he mentioned that we don't teach and get our children ready for marriage in their 20s, right? As we mentioned, I was told, girl, you don't need no man. And I know that's wrong grammar, but I'm going to go with that for right now, right? Girl, you don't need no man. Girl, you don't need nobody to help you. Be independent. I'm tired. I'm tired of being independent, right?
Exactly.
We have to stop telling our children that you don't need the next, because that's a flat out lie. That's wrong. And then we expect our young girls to develop into these women. Okay, now you're 30. Now it's time. You've had your fun. Does that mean it's going to happen then? Right? I tell women that's younger than me, I'm always going to tell them, if you're in college, find your husband now. I told someone that before, and they said, don't be telling my college baby to be finding no husband. Okay, so when are we gonna have this discussion then? Are we gonna wait till she's 30? Are we gonna wait till she's 40? Just because a woman is going to get her education, get her degrees, does that mean she does not have time to focus in other aspects and areas of her life? We have to stop telling our younger people, our young men and our young women, that we don't need one another. That's where we need to start. You have people, as we mentioned, you get into your 30s, you get into your 40s, and you wanting your family, and people are telling you, oh, you still have time. Well, the time was 20 years ago. We should have been talking about it then. Why are we not promoting marriages? Why are we not promoting marriages?
I'm with you. And I think a lot of the times the marriage isn't promoted because that means that a lot of women have to take accountability for their actions and what they did, and they can't let their children know that I made these kinds of mistakes. Instead of letting the children know, hey, I made these mistakes, don't follow in my footsteps. We justify what we've done by saying things like what you said, like you don't need a man, don't do this, don't do that. So,
And
a lot of it models off of what the young girls see every day. Like, say, a lot of them are being raised by single mothers.
And one more thing on it. George mentioned on the last time I was on the podcast, he said, when Black men are better, our communities will be better. Right?
Facts.
And with that, now, nothing against LGBT, nothing against any of that, right?
Right.
I'm 33. I don't have children. That is my desire. But just because I'm at that age, that does not mean I'm just going to give myself to just anyone. So I'm not going to settle for less. If that means I will be, if I won't have children, if that means I won't get married, so be it. But as a Black woman, just because I want that husband or I want that child, that does not mean I'm just going to take anyone that comes my way. I have to have a good Black man that's standing up in line. But where are they?
I actually have the answer.
So I'm gonna pick China. I'm gonna pick on you. I gotta pick on you, China. I gotta pick on you.
It's all good.
I remember us having this discussion of you having a good man, but you got rid of him because of what? Do you remember?
I remember that.
You remember this conversation?
We are not gonna go there, people.
We gotta go
No.
Listen.
That was good.
We're gonna go there because
we're not doing that.
No, we gotta do this because listen, I hear this all the time. Where the good men at? Right? And women get rid of good men for the dumbest reasons. And with due respect, I love you. I do, but y'all get rid of it for the dumbest reasons. And the reason that we struggle, and I'll answer your question, George, about the marriage rates. Remember when Bush said the fundamentals of the economy are strong, but then we went into a recession? And back before we had all of these legislative freedoms with respect to voting and housing rights and all these things, the fundamentals of our community were strong. We were just missing that one piece. Now it's like we've forgotten the fundamentals. We're the current NBA players that rely on talent, right? And we have these Europeans coming here killing us with the fundamentals. That's why the European players, so hard work and fundamental, that's why they dominate so well. That's why we don't, that's why they started to dominate. Black people, we need to get back to the fundamentals. We need to get away from this selfish nature that we're in. We're so selfish. People want to get married for selfish reasons. It's about me. They get divorced for selfish reasons. It's not about family anymore. I left because I wasn't happy. Oh, so to hell with your kids and husband, or to hell with your wife and kids? To hell with them because you weren't happy? It is not about you once you get married. It is about those kids, that next generation. Our grandparents understood this. I sacrificed for them. I lay down for them. It ain't about you. But we want our cake and eat it too. Instead of understanding that we are here to shovel and pave the roads. No, we want comfort. We want comfortability, and this is why our community is struggling. And this last point, and I'll yield. We want we want somebody else to do all of the work, and people are always saying, "I can do bad all by myself." You are doing bad all by yourself. We'd rather look good and lose. You know what I'm saying? I'm strong, I'm independent, and lose than look bad by being accountable and saying this ain't the right way to do it and win. Y'all, we losing.
Okay. All right. So,
So
go ahead.
before we go
Daniel.
too far off, I did want to answer the question that was asked.
Okay.
There are 600,000 more Generation X. This is just Generation X. This does not include the millennials and upcoming Generation Z. 600,000 more black women than black men, largely because of incarceration and early homicides. And we talked earlier about the top 3 leading causes of black men ages 1 through 19. They're just more women. It's literally musical chairs, and there are not enough chairs to go around. That's the first part of it. As far as how to fix the problem, it goes back to, like Penny said, it's the fundamentals, right? Who is teaching a man how to be a man? There is no rites of passage to be a man in a black community, and there used to be, right? A father used to take his son and teach him how to do things with his hand, how to manage a household, right? And because the father part of it has been lost, those lessons have been lost and are no longer being handed down. So, like Penny said, got to get back to the fundamentals. But right now, there is literally a almost a little more than a 500,000 individual. There are 500,000 chairs missing of just one generation. And then when you add in the other generations, you start finding that there are even more chairs missing.
Okay, so a couple of questions. We're not going to get it all tonight. But the last question, which we need to put more meat on the bone to the ladies, is what will it take for the ladies today to increase the marriage rate? If they feel that it's more desirable to have an 80% marriage rate, what's that going to take? And we're not going to get it tonight, but we need to come back with that. The other observation that I want to, because we're going to be closing out here shortly, I want to come back because I opened up in my impromptu monologue with it. But if you think about it, we've covered everything but the most important point in my monologue. And that is, again, racism is declared a public health crisis. And when you look at all of the points that were covered in our discussion today, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, many of those issues are directly related to the impact of racism. It's easy to say things like, well, they just don't want to do it. They just, made bad decisions, these other peripheral type things. But the larger, more pressing issue, overall issue, is racism is a public health crisis. And just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, when I'm talking about racism, like these major medical and psychological associations are just talking about it, it is the systemic implementation of discrimination that prevents access targeted to groups considered disadvantaged. It's not, I don't like the group. It's not any type of emotional feeling. Racism, ISM, stands to the systemic implementation. So it doesn't even require your emotional input because it's systemic. You don't have to even be ideologically aligned to racism for racism work. It doesn't need your alignment. It doesn't need your collaboration. It doesn't need your judgment, your dismissal, or acceptance of it. It is because we've applied it systemically. And so I'm just saying that through this discussion, we really haven't nailed down, drilled down into the systemic influence and impact of many of the things: marriage, education, how to be, who's training men to be men, who's training women to be women. All these things, racism has a hand in varying degrees. And I just think it's important to note that, because if we don't really understand that we have to address this from a larger issue, we're pissing in the wind. So that's my closing monologue. And what I want to do is go around the horn and let you all respond to that assessment, my assessment of how this discussion went and what we covered and what we didn't cover as we close out. So let's start with Penny. Are you there? Okay, he'll be back. Let's start with Zuri. Zuri, you're on mute.
Oh, I was saying, can I go last?
You want to go last? Okay.
Yeah, thinking.
Yes, you can, Queen. We'll start with you. We'll start with China.
I know we're ending, but fairly quickly. Racism has always been an issue. It's just now been declared, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, is it going anywhere? Is it? We have to learn to just deal with what we have. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's not going anywhere. I don't think it's going anywhere. You know, you still have people, the lady who lied on Emmett Till, she's still alive and well. Do you not think she had children who had children? And who's going to have more children? So we just got to learn how to necessarily use, as the old saying goes, use what you got to get what you, y'all get where I'm going. I don't want to dig too deep into it, but that's just my view on, you know, as far as why or how we can get through this issue of racism being a crisis.
Okay, that's a very powerful assessment, and I think it's powerful, not necessarily because I agree with it, but it's powerful because most people think the way that you're thinking as it pertains to racism. And when I say that, it's not a judgment. That's the genius of racism, is that it paralyzes the belief system of the victim. And so we want to pick that theme up because it's very relevant. Most people really think that way. Penny, any closing remarks to the closing monologue that I presented?
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
So I think with respect to racism, I think that we give it more power than it actually has. And let me clarify.
Mm-hmm.
I think that don't get me wrong, racism exists. It's structural racism is a thing, but I think that we spend more time fighting this system instead of understanding where our power is.
Mm.
You know, a wise man once said that the way you defeat the oppressor is to win and defeat the oppressor. Complaining about the oppressor, talking about the oppressor, breaking down the oppressor's strategy will not beat the oppressor without actually beating the oppressor.
I love it.
And you want to rebuild the Black community? It's simple. It begins with the fundamentals. Marry a Black man or a man, marry a Black woman, have Black babies. It's that simple. It starts there. That's how we build our community from the cellular level. All this other stuff, it's pipe dreams if you can't get that part right. You can't win a basketball game if you don't know how to pass, you don't know how to dribble, and you can't make a layup.
Mm-hmm.
You can dunk all day, but if you can't do those three things,
the basics.
you can't win basketball games. You can't beat the basics. You can't You can't win basketball games, and we're taking off from the free throw line. And I'm just running with this basketball metaphor, but we're taking off from the free throw line. We can do the freakiest of moves in the air.
Right.
We can't pass. We can't dribble. We can't defend.
Can't make a layup.
And that's what we are at the Black community, complaining about the NBA's rules.
And don't have the bases covered.
And we don't have the bases covered.
So I love that. The additional challenge that I will put to your prescription there, because I think 90% of it is right on point. The additional challenge I put to that, though, is in terms of beating the oppressor, having the appropriate strategy with which to do that. And I want to pick that up. So I'm gathering these themes. I want to pick up the theme of the belief that racism is not going anywhere. I want to, for the next series, I want to address that, and this idea of self-determination, which is what Penny is adhering to. That requires a skill set. It requires a mindset. And my observation is that our community currently, as is, neither has the skill set nor the mindset with which to conquer the oppressor. So I want to dig into that for the next one. Let's go to Zuri. Zuri, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready now.
Okay.
I agree with what China said. Is racism going anywhere? And I agree with Penny said as well. And I believe as we as a people, if we stop focusing on it and start focusing on the things that are more important, we can overturn it. And if majority of us stop living in fear-based realities, which is false evidence appearing real, it would change a whole lot of things. And like I always say, if we as a people truly knew who we are and we stop putting these labels on ourselves and stop saying we're African American, we're Black, and really start stepping into our true power, everything, the game will be totally changed. There would be nothing that they can do to stop us.
Amen, Zuri. Daniel, I ain't scared of you. Bleep Williams.
Say something once, it's never going to go away. I'm going to break it down. My top level, my headline, if you will, is really just 3 words. Raise stronger boys. That's the first part of my answer. We are actually able to do both. And I think that this has become the misnomer that because you're fighting racism, we can't also do the things necessary internally. Because racism is an external issue. We don't control that, but we do fight against it. But there are things we can do internally. And so just because we're fighting the systemic does not abdicate us from the responsibility to do what we can do internally. That means if you are the father to a Black boy, you need to do everything in your power to teach him everything you wish you had known when he was younger and that you learned earlier. You need to teach him that as early as possible. Give him the principles as well as the work ethic, as well as the mentality to fight the system and pick up the fight when you fall. That's the first thing. Secondly, if you are a young man who does not have children but has a base of knowledge because you've walked that path, you have a responsibility to at least go and help one, not all, just one who is not related to you, if possible, to at least pass that knowledge on to them so that they can also continue to fight once you fall. And then lastly, we have to prepare our young men to love our women. That to me is also critical. There are a lot of Black women who have an issue with Black men, but there are a lot of Black men who have an issue with Black women as well. And we need to cut down that division, and we need to get back to loving each other. But it starts first with raising our young men to be the type of men who will make good fathers and ultimately good husbands.
Yes.
Hey, y'all picking that up?
Yep, sure am.
Hold on. You're connected somehow. Hold on.
You're loud. You're loud. That's you're picking up in the background. I'm not picking up on here, so they're picking up your conversation. Close the door. No, they're picking up background. Yeah. My apologies.
Tell her we said hey.
She's closed the door.
Well, Daniel, thank you for that perspective. I concur. We got some meat on this bone. We're talking about a black community. We're talking about a community. Every community needs the same things. But we get different outcomes based on how we look at it. There's the cliche that is one of my favorite ones. When you change the way that you look at things, the things that you look at change. So we've got some changing to do, because we definitely do not want to practice the definition of insanity.
Can I add on to that, George?
Yes, please.
And also, when we change the way that we think about things, that will also change as well.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, very, very riveting discussion. And man, look at this panel. Look at this. Whew. This is power right here. You know, we've got solution builders right here. And one of the things that I love is that we all have different perspectives, and we're all strong personalities, but we make room for each other, because we're not insecure about who we are. We're not secure about our ideas, or, you know, game recognized game. Iron sharpens iron. That's what's needed. You know, what's that term that the right wing came up with? Snowflakes. We don't need no snowflakes. You know, and we've proven, our community has proven through the history of this country, that we're anything but soft. However, again, racism is a public health crisis. By the year 2053, the average wealth per black family is going to be $0. In this country, morals and mouth don't win the game. It takes resources. Get your resources together first before you mount your battle. We're fighting a battle without resources. So that's getting into another discussion. I'm sure people got feedback on that. So I better go ahead and stop our rap. This has been great. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, China. Thank you, Zuri. Thank you, Penny, flying in hot off the airlines. Yes, sir. This has been Black Space Live. Have a great week. And until the next time we meet, we'll see you on the Black Space.